Every night, the maid gave herself to the lonely millionaire, until one day. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new dramatic stories. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more heartfelt content every week. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. It all began on a cold, rainy night in New York City. Through the glass walls of a high-rise penthouse, the city lights shimmered like distant fireflies, blurred by raindrops that slid down the window pane. Inside, silence ruled the vast living room, a silence so deep it almost had weight. Michael Sterling sat alone on a black leather sofa, his shirt collar loosened, a half-empty glass of whiskey resting in his hand. His eyes were fixed on nothing, only the dark reflection of himself in the glass. The man who once built an empire from code and chaos now looked like a monument carved out of loneliness. Across the room stood Victoria Hale, a young maid, barely 26, wearing a crisp uniform and holding her breath as if the wrong move might shatter the fragile calm. She had been hired only 2 weeks earlier, through an agency that warned her, "Mr. Sterling does not like noise. He does not like questions. Do your work and keep quiet." But that night, something changed. Without a word, he gestured for her to stay as she turned to leave. The rain tapped gently against the tall windows, and for the first time his voice broke the stillness. "Stay," he said quietly. Victoria froze, "Sir. Stay for 1 hour. Every night." His tone was steady, not commanding, almost pleading. "I will double your pay. You do not need to speak. Just stay." "Choke?" She blinked, uncertain if she had heard correctly. "What exactly do you mean, Mr. Sterling?" He looked up at her then, his eyes tired but clear. "I do not need your body," he said. "I need proof that I am not alone." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The sound of the storm filled the space between them, the slow rhythm of rain against glass, the faint hum of the city below. Victoria wanted to refuse, but her hands trembled at the thought of her brother's hospital bills stacked on her kitchen table. This job was supposed to be her last chance before everything fell apart. Finally, she nodded. "All right, I will stay." Michael leaned back, staring into his drink. "Good. Then from tonight, that will be our arrangement." Hungry. As the clock ticked toward midnight, she sat in silence across from him, feeling the strange tension of two strangers, sharing the same room yet separated by 1,000 invisible walls. The thunder rolled far away, the rain softened, and in that quiet, something unspoken began to take root. Every night after that, the maid would return. She thought she was simply giving him her time, but soon she would learn that what she was truly giving him was her heart. The next morning, sunlight pushed through the gray clouds that had blanketed New York all week. Victoria woke up in her small apartment in Queens, the sound of a dripping faucet echoing through the quiet. Her phone buzzed with a new message, an overdue notice from the hospital. The amount glared at her, $9,247.16. Her brother's medical bills were rising faster than she could keep up. She sat at the tiny kitchen table, staring at the balance, the corners of her eyes burning. The coffee she had brewed tasted thin and bitter, like defeat. For a moment, she thought about quitting the job at the Sterling penthouse. The man was strange, unpredictable. Who pays someone just to sit in silence? But then she remembered the quiet tone in his voice when he said, "I just need proof that I am not alone." There had been something heartbreakingly human in that sentence. At the housekeeping agency later that day, her supervisor glanced up from a stack of files. "Back at Mr. Sterling's again tonight." Victoria nodded. "You are lucky he keeps you," the woman said flatly. "Most of the others lasted a week before running off. He does not talk much, but he pays on time. Do not mess it up." "I will not," Victoria replied, clutching her ID badge like a lifeline. When night came, the rain returned. The penthouse looked different this time, less intimidating, somehow softer. Michael Sterling sat at the same spot on the sofa, the city lights flickering behind him. He looked up briefly when she entered. "You are here," he said quietly. "You asked me to be?" she answered. He nodded, motioning toward the chair across from him. The clock on the wall ticked. For several minutes neither spoke. The silence was heavy but not uncomfortable. Victoria folded her hands in her lap, forcing herself to stay calm. Finally he broke the quiet. "Do you think it is strange?" "What is?" that I pay for company. That I need noise in a house I built to be quiet. Namo. Victoria thought carefully before answering. Loneliness does not care how big the house is. It finds you anyway. He gave a faint smile, surprised by her honesty. You are smarter than most people think. I clean floors for a living, Mr. Sterling, not people's opinions. For the first time he laughed softly, but it was real. That small sound startled her. It was the first proof that behind his cold exterior, there was still a man capable of warmth. As the days turned into a quiet routine, their evenings became almost ritualistic. 9 o'clock sharp she would knock once, enter, and sit opposite him. He would pour whiskey into his glass but never drink it all. She would bring tea and place it gently near his elbow. Sometimes they spoke about simple things, the view, the weather, a song on the radio. Other nights, they said nothing at all. One evening, when the thunder was rolling low in the distance, he handed her a small leather notebook. If you ever feel like talking, write instead, he said. She looked down at the blank pages. What am I supposed to write? Anything, or nothing. Just proof that you were here. From that night on, she started writing. Short notes at first about the rain, the city, her favorite street in Queens. Then gradually, deeper thoughts. Her brother's struggle, her fear of failing, her guilt about surviving. He read them silently, never commenting. But she could see it in his eyes the way each word reached some hidden corner of his grief. One Friday evening, as she prepared to leave, Michael said without looking up, "You should not come tomorrow." Her heart skipped. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," he said, "but tomorrow is the anniversary of something I do not wish anyone to see." "Come over." She hesitated. "I can still be here, quietly." He shook his head. No one should have to sit through someone else's ghosts. That night, as she rode the subway home, Victoria stared at her reflection in the window. The city flashed by in streaks of gold and blue. She realized she did not just pity him, she understood him. Because somewhere deep down, she carried her own ghosts too. The next evening, though he had told her not to come, she found herself standing again outside his door, holding an umbrella against the wind. She knocked once. Inside, the lights were off. Through the half-open door, she saw him sitting in the dark, the same glass of whiskey untouched beside him, an old photograph in his hand. Without a word, she stepped in, placed a single candle on the table, and lit it. The soft flame flickered, painting gold on both their faces. Michael looked up at her, eyes wet but steady. "I thought I said not tonight." "You did," she replied. "But I am not here to talk. I am just here so you do not have to remember alone." For a long time he said nothing. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "Every night I thought I was paying you to keep me company. But maybe you are the one keeping me alive." Outside, the rain softened. Inside, two silent souls shared one fragile peace neither had felt in years. The following night came quietly, wrapped in the hush of early winter. The rain had stopped, leaving the city glistening under the yellow glow of the streetlights. Inside the Sterling penthouse, the usual chill of marble and glass was replaced by something gentler, the faint scent of tea, and a single lamp glowing on the side table. Victoria arrived exactly at 9. She had stopped being nervous about the silence between them. It had become familiar, almost comforting. Tonight, however, something new waited for her on the glass coffee table, a document folder sealed with a silver clip. Michael sat in his chair, his expression unreadable. "You mentioned you needed money for your brother," he said quietly. "I can help with that." Her heart skipped. "You already pay me more than enough." He slid the folder toward her. "This is an extension of your contract. It adds one more clause. You will still come every night, but there will be structure." "Godot." She frowned, hesitant to touch the paper. "Structure? Yes. I want to make sure you feel safe. You will be compensated fairly, and I do not want any misunderstandings about why you are here." He opened the folder himself, revealing the typed pages. His voice was steady, almost businesslike. "There are rules," he said. 5 of them. He began to read aloud. 1. You arrive at 9 o'clock sharp. 2. You leave at 10 unless otherwise agreed. 3. You are not to enter my bedroom. 4. You are free to speak or remain silent. 5. If you ever feel unsafe, you may end the arrangement immediately. No penalty, no questions. Victoria stared at him, surprised. The clarity of the rules felt almost kind. It was the opposite of exploitation. "You made that last rule yourself?" she asked. He met her eyes. Yes, because you looked frightened the first night. Her throat tightened. She took the pen he offered and signed at the bottom, her hand trembling slightly. As she set the pen down, he added one more line in his own handwriting. No physical contact. Respect is not optional. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the faint ticking of the clock. Then he handed her a small box. Inside was a new teacup porcelain, white with a thin gold rim. Use this, he said simply. I broke the old one yesterday. I thought you might like your own. She smiled for the first time that evening. Thank you, it is beautiful. Oh, do. It is just a cup, he said, but his eyes softened. From that night, their routine changed. The air between them felt lighter. Some evenings, Victoria would read aloud from the newspaper, and he would listen with his eyes closed, as if the sound of her voice helped him forget the emptiness that used to echo in the room. Other nights, she wrote in the leather notebook while he worked on his laptop, the quiet hum of typing and the scratch of pen forming an odd sort of music. One night, she asked about the piano in the corner. It has not been played since my wife died, he said softly. She was the one who knew how. Then maybe it is time someone learns, she replied. Music should not die with people. He looked at her for a long time, and for a moment she thought he might argue. Instead, he simply nodded. Over the next few days, she began practicing during the afternoons while cleaning. The first notes were clumsy, but she laughed at herself. Michael would sometimes pause in the doorway, watching quietly, his usual tension replaced by something that looked almost like peace. Late one night, as she prepared to leave, he said, You remind me that there are still new beginnings. She smiled. Even for people who think they have already lived their story? Especially for them, he answered. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, covering the city like a clean slate. But behind the quiet progress, a different kind of tension was starting to grow. At the agency, rumors had begun to circulate. Someone had seen Victoria entering the penthouse every night, always alone. Whispers spread quickly, cruel, sharp, and poisonous. When she returned to the apartment that night, her friend Marcy waited by the door. Vicky, you need to be careful, she warned. People are talking. They think he is using you. Victoria's face flushed with anger. They do not know anything. He is not like that. Maybe not, Marcy said softly, but the world does not care about truth, only gossip. Victoria turned away, trying to swallow the lump in her throat. She told herself she did not care, but when she walked back into the penthouse the next night, her steps were slower. Michael noticed immediately. Something happened? She shook her head. Just a long day. Come on. He studied her face, then said quietly, If anyone gives you trouble because of this arrangement, I will make sure they stop. His tone was calm but firm, the voice of a man who was used to protecting what mattered to him. She wanted to tell him not to worry, that she could handle it. But as she met his eyes, she realized that for the first time in years, someone was worried about her, not out of pity but respect. And for a fleeting second, the space between them did not feel like an employer and a maid. It felt like two souls rebuilding trust, one rule, one conversation, one quiet night at a time. Winter deepened over the city, and with it came a strange sense of rhythm inside the Sterling penthouse. By now, Victoria's presence had become part of Michael's nightly routine, as natural as the ticking of the clock on the marble wall. Every night at 9, she arrived with her tea set and that same gentle smile, bringing warmth to a home that once felt frozen in time. The housekeeper and security staff began to notice the change. The lights in the main living room no longer stayed dark. Michael no longer ignored the meals brought to his table. Sometimes, faint piano notes drifted down the hallway, hesitant, tender, and unfinished. It was Victoria playing. At first, she practiced quietly, embarrassed by her mistakes. But one evening, when she faltered mid-song, Michael surprised her by walking over and pressing the next key himself. The right note is not always the perfect one, he said softly. Sometimes it is the one that feels like home. She looked up, caught off guard. That sounds like something your wife would have said. He smiled faintly. It was. From that night, he began joining her. Two lost souls, sitting side by side at a piano that had been silent for years, their laughter filling spaces once haunted by grief. When she arrived each evening, she started noticing subtle changes. The whiskey glass was gone. The curtains were open. The air smelled faintly of cedar instead of dust. He had started living again, even if he did not realize it. One night, while they sat across from each other as usual, Michael said, You know, people in my circle think I have lost my mind. Tame. Because of me? She asked quietly. Because I hired someone who listens, he replied. That is apparently a luxury. Victoria lowered her eyes. Listening is not a luxury, it is survival. He looked at her thoughtfully. Then maybe you are the first person keeping me alive. For the first time, their silence felt fragile, electric. A single look carried more emotion than any words could. Days passed, and their connection grew into an unspoken understanding. He began to trust her judgment in small things, asking her opinion on a speech, letting her choose the flowers for the office lobby, inviting her to small events as a staff member he valued. But that decision would soon test them both. One Friday evening, Michael was scheduled to host a private dinner for investors and board members. The event took place inside his home, the same space where Victoria had spent countless quiet nights. The agency had assigned her to supervise catering. When she arrived, the dining room shimmered with polished silver and crystal light. She tried to stay invisible, moving between tables, pouring wine. But whispers began almost immediately. One of the investors, Olivia Crane, elegant, poised, and cruel in her curiosity, leaned toward Michael with a smirk. "Is that her?" she said, just loud enough for others to hear. "The maid you keep around at night?" The air went still. Michael's jaw tightened. He set down his glass and looked directly at Olivia. "Yes," he said calmly, "that is her. The one person who treats me like a man, not a balance sheet." Olivia blinked, caught off guard. A nervous laugh rippled through the table, but no one dared to respond. Victoria froze behind the server's cart, her cheeks burning. Shame and pride warred inside her. Shame for being exposed, pride for being defended. When the dinner ended, she quietly gathered dishes in the kitchen. Michael appeared in the doorway. "I am sorry," he said softly. "I should not have spoken like that in front of them." She shook her head. "You told the truth. That is nothing to apologize for." "But the truth can be cruel," he murmured. She met his gaze and smiled faintly. "Only when people twist it." That night, as she prepared to leave, she noticed something different on the coffee table. The leather notebook, the one where she wrote her thoughts, had been placed next to a new object, a small framed photo of his late wife. Michael caught her looking. "She used to sit where you do," he said quietly. "But she never liked silence. You do." Victoria's voice softened. "Maybe silence is how we both survive it." As she closed the door behind her, she realized something had changed. The arrangement no longer felt like a contract. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them dared to name. Outside, snow was falling again. Soft, endless, and forgiving, covering every trace of where their separate lives had been. The following week, the storm that had started at that dinner never truly passed. Whispers about Michael and his maid spread quietly through the city's corporate circles, the kind of gossip that thrived on half-truths and envy. By the time Victoria arrived at the agency one morning, the front desk clerk avoided her eyes. Her supervisor called her into a back office, his tone clipped and uncomfortable. "Victoria, there have been comments. Clients asking questions. About you and Mr. Sterling." She swallowed hard. "Comments about what?" He hesitated. "They say you spend every night at his penthouse, that it is not professional." "That is not true," she said, her voice trembling. "He hired me to keep him company, nothing more." The supervisor sighed. "In our line of work, perception is everything. If this continues, the agency might have to reconsider your placement." She left the office feeling as if the floor had vanished beneath her feet. Every step to the subway felt heavier, every glance from strangers sharper. When she reached the penthouse that evening, she almost turned back. Almost. But when the elevator doors opened, Michael was already waiting. He looked exhausted, his expression guarded. "You heard about it," he said quietly. "I did," she admitted. "They are saying things I cannot control," he went on, running a hand through his hair. "Some of my board members think this arrangement is inappropriate. They want me to release you." Her chest tightened. "Do you want that too?" He shook his head immediately. "No, but I cannot stop them from talking." Victoria took a slow breath. "Then let them talk. I know who I am, and so do you." Tall. He studied her face, the calm resolve behind her words. "You always surprise me," he said. "Why?" she asked softly. "Because you make dignity look easy," he replied. That night, they did not read or play the piano. They simply sat across from each other, the silence thicker than usual, carrying the weight of unspoken worry. A few days later, Michael had to attend a charity gala, one of those events where every handshake was a transaction, every smile a calculation. He asked Victoria to come along, insisting it was part of her work for the evening. She hesitated, but he reassured her. "You will not be my maid there," he said. "You will be my guest." The ballroom shimmered with gold chandeliers and polished marble floors. Victoria wore a simple navy gown borrowed from the housekeeper's niece, and though she tried to blend in, heads turned as soon as she entered beside him. Throughout the night, she stayed by his side, poised, quiet, polite. But people stared. Whispers floated like smoke. Olivia Crane appeared again, her smile sharp as glass. "Well," she said, raising her champagne, "the rumors were true after all." Michael's eyes darkened. "Careful, Olivia," he warned. "You are mistaking decency for scandal." "Oh, I am not sure there is a difference in this city," Olivia replied sweetly, and walked away. Victoria's hands shook slightly as she reached for her glass of water. "Do not let her get to you," Michael said gently. "She lives for poison." "I am not ashamed," Victoria whispered. "Just tired of fighting battles I never started." He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time, there was something unguarded in his expression. "Then, let me fight this one," he said. Before she could answer, one of the servers stumbled nearby, spilling a tray of wine across the floor. Without thinking, Victoria bent down to help, pressing napkins into the mess while others simply watched. Her dress soaked, her knees on the marble, she smiled at the server and said softly, "It is just glass and liquid. No harm done." The moment was small, but it spread through the room like a spark. Some people looked embarrassed, others quietly impressed. Later that night, as they returned to the penthouse, Michael stopped her at the door. "What you did tonight," he said, "was not small. It reminded me what grace looks like." She laughed softly, brushing her wet hair from her face. "I did not do it for show." "I know," he said. "That is what made it powerful." For the first time he reached out not to touch her, but to close the umbrella she was holding, his fingers brushing the handle near hers. The air between them changed, charged with something both frightening and real. "Good night, Mr. Sterling," she said quietly, her heart pounding. "Good night, Victoria," he replied. As she stepped into the elevator, she realized something had shifted. The line they had drawn so carefully between professionalism and feeling was beginning to blur, and she did not know whether to fear it or welcome it. That night, for the first time in a long while, neither of them slept. The snow fell heavier that week, covering the city in a quiet white glow. Inside the Sterling penthouse, the air was still warm, but something inside both of them had changed. The distance that once protected them now felt fragile, as if one more word could shatter it. Michael spent more time in his study, pretending to work, yet his eyes often drifted toward the clock, waiting for 9 o'clock the moment she would arrive. Victoria, meanwhile, began to dread that same hour. Her heart raced every time she pressed the elevator button, unsure whether she was walking into another evening of silence or something more dangerous, something she could no longer control. That Thursday night, the snow outside turned into a storm. The wind howled against the windows, rattling the tall glass panes. Victoria entered the room carrying a tray with tea, only to find Michael standing by the piano. He was not in his usual suit. He wore a soft gray sweater, his hair slightly undone, his expression distant. "You came even with the storm," he said quietly. "I said I would," she replied, setting down the tray. For a long time they stood in silence. Then he asked, "Do you ever think about leaving?" She blinked, unsure how to answer. "Leaving the job?" "Leaving this arrangement," he said. "The rumors, the judgment, it cannot be easy for you." "It is not," she admitted. "But it is not unbearable either." "Why not?" "Because I know who you are, Michael," she said softly. "And because I know who I am." He took a slow breath. "Everyone else sees a scandal, but you see me." She smiled faintly. "Maybe that is what you hired me for." "Ard I?" "Maybe," he said, his voice low. "Or maybe I hired you because I forgot what kindness looked like." The thunder outside shook the windows. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The penthouse plunged into darkness. Victoria gasped, fumbling for her phone flashlight. "It is just a power cut," Michael said, though his voice trembled slightly. She turned the small light toward him and froze. His face was pale, his breathing uneven. "Michael?" He sank onto the sofa, gripping his chest. "It is fine," he murmured. I hate the dark. It reminds me." He stopped, shaking his head. Without thinking, she knelt beside him, her hand hovering near his shoulder but not touching. Reminds you of what? He swallowed hard. The night she died. The car crash. I was supposed to be driving. The power went out at home that night too. I told her I would pick her up later. I never did. Yes, okay. The confession hung in the air like a storm of its own. Victoria set the flashlight on the table so the light fell softly across his face. Michael, you cannot keep punishing yourself for surviving, she said gently. You would have traded places with her if you could, but life did not ask for permission. His eyes met hers, raw and vulnerable. How do you live with that kind of guilt? You do not, she said quietly. You carry it until someone helps you remember that you are still human. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the only sound the wind outside, and the faint tick of the grandfather clock still running on battery. Then he reached forward and took her hand. The touch was not romantic. It was desperate, the grasp of a man clinging to something real. She did not pull away. When the lights flickered back on, he slowly released her hand. Thank you, he said, his voice steady again. For what? For staying. She stood up, her pulse racing. That is what I am here for. But as she turned to leave, his next words followed her like a whisper that would not fade. No, Victoria, that is why you matter. That night, she walked home through falling snow, realizing she had crossed the one line she swore she never would. She cared. And caring, she knew, would change everything. The next morning, the storm had cleared, but an even colder wind began to blow, not outside, but within the walls of the Sterling Empire. When Michael arrived at his office, the boardroom was already filled. Olivia Crane stood near the head of the table, a thin smile painted across her face. Michael, she began smoothly, we need to discuss a situation that is starting to affect the company's reputation. He set down his briefcase. If this is about the gossip again, I am not interested. Lo. It is not gossip anymore, Olivia said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were printed screenshots, photos, and headlines, his name beside hers. The billionaire and his maid. His stomach turned. Where did you get these? Your building's security footage, she said. Someone leaked it to the press. It looks compromising. He flipped through the still frames, grainy images of Victoria walking into the penthouse at night, leaving near midnight. Out of context, they looked like proof of an affair. Destroy it, he said flatly. I cannot, Olivia replied. It is already scheduled for publication. Unless, of course, you agree to step back temporarily and let me take over your responsibilities. He looked up, understanding the trap. You are blackmailing me. I am protecting the company, she said with mock sincerity. And perhaps protecting you from yourself. Number 5. That evening, when Victoria arrived, the air in the penthouse felt wrong, too still, too heavy. Michael was standing by the window, holding a printed tabloid. Her photo was on the cover. Victoria, he said quietly, it is out. She took the paper, her eyes widening as she read the headline. The article twisted every detail, painting her as a gold digger who had seduced her employer for money and influence. Her hands shook. This is a lie. I know, he said, but the world will not care. Tears burned behind her eyes. They will believe whatever they want because I am the easy target, the poor maid. He moved closer. I will fix it. How? She demanded. By firing me? By pretending I do not exist? He went silent. His hesitation said everything. She stepped back, her voice breaking. You said I mattered, Michael, that I helped you remember who you were. But when they come for you, I am the first thing you are willing to lose. Losing. That is not true. Then prove it. But he could not. Not yet. The next morning, she was gone. Her locker at the agency was empty. No forwarding address, no message. Only the leather notebook she had left on his piano, the last page blank. Days passed in silence. The world outside roared with scandal. But inside his penthouse, there was only absence. The house felt colder than it had before she arrived. The teacup sat untouched, her handwriting fading on the notes she used to leave. Michael spent hours staring at the last page of that notebook, as if waiting for words that would never appear. At a press conference later that week, reporters shouted questions about the scandal. He ignored them all. But when one asked, "Is it true you paid your maid for companionship?" he stopped walking. For a moment the cameras clicked wildly. Then he said softly, "No, I paid her for her time. But what she gave me was humanity, and that cannot be bought." Hodri. The footage spread online within hours. Some mocked him, some listened. But for the first time, he did not care about perception. That night, as snow began to fall again outside his window, he realized something undeniable. He could live without the company, without reputation, even without peace, but not without her. 2 weeks later, New York woke to another headline, this time not about scandal, but about redemption. Michael Sterling had announced a public gala to celebrate his company's new charity foundation, the Quiet Hour Project. It was meant to support mental health programs for employees and their families, but everyone knew the real reason behind it. He was reclaiming his voice. The ballroom glowed beneath chandeliers, cameras flashing from every corner. Olivia Crane, perfectly dressed as always, moved among the guests like she already owned the place. The board thought this event would clean his reputation. What they did not know was that Michael had planned something very different. When he stepped onto the stage, the room quieted. His suit was immaculate, but his expression carried the weight of a decision already made. "Good evening," he began, his voice steady but low. "For years this company taught me how to win. Tonight I want to talk about what it means to lose, and what you can find when you do. Come do." A whisper moved through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in. Olivia smiled tightly, waiting for a mistake she could use. Michael continued, "A few weeks ago, many of you read lies about a woman who worked in my home. Lies that painted her as something less than she is. I allowed those lies to live because I was afraid. But tonight that fear ends." He gestured to the large screen behind him. The lights dimmed. A video began to play security footage, but not the one Olivia had leaked. This was the full version, unedited. On the screen, Victoria appeared in the penthouse quietly setting tea, reading aloud while he sat in silence. There was no intimacy, no scandal, only stillness and grace. Then the frame froze on a single moment, her leaving a note on his desk, the words visible under the light. "Do not forget to sleep, Mr. Sterling." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Olivia's smile vanished. Michael's voice broke slightly as he said, "She never touched me. She never used me. She saved me. And if anyone in this room believes that dignity and kindness are weaknesses, then you have never truly lived." The ballroom erupted in murmurs. Some clapped hesitantly, others looked away. But the truth was out, and this time it belonged to him. He looked straight into the cameras. "My name is Michael Sterling. I resign from my position as CEO effective immediately. I am transferring the majority of my shares to the foundation, in her name, the Victoria Hale Fund for Human Dignity." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, applause, not loud but sincere. Later that night, the city buzzed with the news. Some called it madness, others called it bravery. But Michael did not care. As he left the building, a light snow began to fall, melting on his shoulders. For the first time, he felt free. Across town, Victoria was cleaning tables at a small cafe, trying to rebuild her life quietly. When the television above the counter flashed his name, she looked up. Her breath caught as she saw his face and heard the words he spoke. The other employees turned to her, whispering, "Is that really him? Is that you?" She did not answer. She just stood there, tears forming in her eyes. Michael's voice echoed through the speakers. "She gave herself every night, not her body, but her heart. And now, the least I can do is give mine back." The audience in the gala applauded again, but in that little cafe miles away, a single tear slipped down Victoria's cheek. For the first time in weeks, she smiled, not out of victory, but relief. The truth had finally spoken for both of them. Spring came quietly to New York, washing away the snow that had witnessed so much heartbreak. 3 months had passed since the night of the gala, the night Michael Sterling had walked away from everything he once thought defined him. He now lived a simpler life, renting a modest apartment above a bookstore in Brooklyn. His mornings began with coffee and handwritten letters from people who had watched his speech online, strangers thanking him for speaking about dignity, loss, and healing. He responded to every letter by hand, but there was one letter he never received, the one from Victoria. Every day, he wondered where she was. One afternoon, as he walked past a small cafe near the East River, he heard a familiar sound, the quiet clink of a porcelain cup, the gentle hum of someone humming while working. He stopped. Through the window, sunlight fell across her face. Victoria was wiping down tables, her hair tied back, a soft smile on her lips. For a long moment he just stood there, unsure if he should go in. Then she looked up, and their eyes met. Her expression froze in surprise, then softened into something he had not seen since that winter, peace. When he stepped inside, she set the cloth down slowly. You should not be here, she said, though her voice trembled. Probably not, he answered, but I had to see for myself that you are all right. I am, she said quietly. The foundation is helping people. You did that. No, he replied. You did. Ayunin. They stood there in silence until she finally asked, Why did you give up everything? He smiled gently. Because for the first time, I realized that wealth means nothing if it costs you your soul. You gave me back mine. She exhaled softly, the tension in her shoulders easing. You could have sent a message, a call, anything. I tried, he said, but every word I wrote sounded like an apology, and I did not want to apologize for feeling something real. Hi. She looked at him for a long time before walking to the counter. From a small shelf, she pulled out a familiar leather notebook, worn, the edges frayed. You left this in the piano room, she said. I kept it. I thought maybe one day you would come back for it. He opened it slowly. Inside was a single new page written in her handwriting. It read, You once told me I reminded you to live. If you are reading this, it means you finally learned how. Baklet. He closed the book, emotion catching in his throat. I have learned, he whispered, but it feels unfinished without you. She smiled, tears glinting in her eyes. I do not belong in your world, Michael. Then let us build a new one, he said. One where neither of us has to pretend. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, spilling golden light across the calf floor. That evening, they walked along the riverbank, side by side, saying very little. The city shimmered in the distance, loud, restless, unaware that two people had just rewritten what love meant. Later, as they stood watching the water, Michael handed her something small. A ring, simple and elegant, nothing like the one from his past. This time, he said softly, it is not part of any contract. Victoria smiled, her voice barely a whisper, then it might actually last. He took her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally, without hesitation, without fear. The scene faded to the gentle glow of sunset over the river, and the voiceover closed with his words, steady, full of quiet truth. Every night, she gave herself to the lonely millionaire, not her body, but her heart, until one day she taught him that real love is not bought, not signed, not owned. It is simply given and finally returned.